Hi, my name is Josh, and I am a librarian with Pioneer Library System. Today we're going to be talking about a couple of tips for kitchen safety. All of this advice that I'm going to try and give you guys comes straight from the USDA and other wonderful authorities that know what they're talking about. So we're going to start with some tips for using knives in the kitchen. So if you've never cooked before or are scared of knives, that's good. Knives are scary, they're sharp. The first thing you want to do is have a cutting board. You always want to be cutting on a surface like this for a number of reasons. First, we have a beautiful countertop here at the well where we're filming today. We don't want to scratch it up with a knife. Second, if you're cutting and preparing multiple kinds of food, like if you're preparing meat and you're also preparing vegetables, it's really great and important to have separate cutting boards for each of those things so you don't cross-contaminate. Ideally, you'll be cooking everything to where it's going to be totally free of bacteria, but if you chop raw meat on this cutting board and then you chop some fresh vegetables on it, you'll have exposed them to any bacteria that might have been in that meat, and then you've got a whole new problem on your hands. Step one, we're going to get our cutting board prepared. Now right here, we've just got a great little wood bamboo cutting board, but as you see, if I push it much at all, it slides around. So here's your first tip. Always put a wet towel or a wet paper towel underneath your cutting board. So I've just got some paper towels right here. I'm gonna go wet these real quick. It doesn't have to be anything fancy. We're just using kind of cheap paper towels here. If you've got like a tea towel in your kitchen, that's perfect for this kind of thing. But all this is gonna do is give it a little bit of traction against the surface of your counter so that it doesn't slide around as easily. There we go. See, that's already much harder to move. The second tip we want to share is how to hold and use a knife without cutting your fingers. So if you used the knife before, or you learned to cook when you were young, you might have done this the way that I did. So say I want to cut this cucumber, got my left hand, because I'm right-handed, holding the vegetable, take my right hand, and I start chopping. Now, if you're careful, you can probably do this safely, but this isn't the best way to do it because your fingertips are always at risk of being in the way of the knife. That's bad. So what you actually want to do is take your hand and you're going to kind of curl your fingers under. I like to kind of use the outside of this middle part of my finger as a guide. So my fingertips are curled underneath. Then you can use that. So there's still a little bit of danger if you're swinging the knife like this, which you shouldn't be doing. But if you're chopping like this, then your fingertips are safe from being chopped by your knife. So tip number 2, don't cut with your fingertips out. Make sure and curl them underneath your fingers like this. All right, our third tip for knife safety here is a little bit counterintuitive, and that is that the safest knife in your kitchen is a sharp knife. Now you might be thinking that a sharp knife is going to hurt you because it is sharp and it will puncture your skin. That's correct, but only if you are using improper knife technique and your knife actually gets too close to your skin. The problem with a dull knife is that it is unpredictable. To demonstrate, we've got here this nice sharp knife. I just sharpened it right before we started today. And if I take it here, I'm just gonna give it a little push. There, that went very, very gently, very easily through this vegetable. On the other hand, let's look at this knife here. It's hard to see on camera, but it's got some rusty spots. It's a little bit dull. And I'm not gonna like run my finger along the blade, but I do know that if I did that, it probably wouldn't actually hurt because this is a very dull knife. So let's do the same thing, just a little bit of pressure. Okay, so you can see here, I have barely even made an incision in this vegetable at all. That did almost nothing. So that's not very efficient, first off, but the real reason this is unsafe is because whenever you have to put more force and more effort into cutting something with a dull knife, you're putting a lot of force. You're using all your muscles to push this knife down. So if it slips and you hit your finger with it, you're hitting it with a lot of pressure and you're likely to cause yourself some real harm. Invest in something like this if you're able to, one of these little dual-purpose coarse and fine knife sharpeners. If you run your knives through these a couple times, every couple weeks, that is going to save you a lot of hassle in the kitchen. If you have somewhere in your community that you can go to get your knives sharpened, there are a lot of places that can do that, and that's really helpful. Along those lines, if you ever accidentally drop a knife in the kitchen, just step away. Don't try and grab it. Don't trust that you have some sort of Karate Kid reflexes and will grab it by the handle. You're just as likely to grab it by the blade and totally mess up your fingers. If you drop a knife, just step back. Ranges and cooktops account for more than 51% of household fires, so it's important to keep in mind safety tips whenever you're dealing with a stovetop, especially a gas stovetop, but any stovetop. So a couple of things is I'm already doing a bad job here. You never want to have any long sleeves or baggy clothing around your cooktop that could get caught on fire when you're cooking. You also don't want to have like a roll of paper towels within a foot of the cooktop, anything that if something went wrong could easily catch on fire. So I'm gonna go ahead and roll up my sleeves. Now another thing you always want to do, and this is probably not exactly what your stovetop at home looks like, but you always want to make sure that the handles of your pots and pans are one, not over other burners on your stovetop. So you want them turned outward. But you also want to make sure that they are, once they're turned outward, they are over a countertop or some other surface like that. You never want your stovetop handles to be hanging off of the countertop, because then you or someone else could walk by, bump it with your hip, and then spill food, not only all over the floor, but all over them or you. And that is an enormous safety hazard because this food gets very, very hot. You also want to make sure and always have some oven mitts handy. You can have something like this, one of these silicone oven mitts, or they make cloth versions of these. I like these a lot. There are these little smaller guys, or even just something like this. The ideal setup is going to be that the heat is mostly captured here in the pot or the pan itself, but sometimes, especially if it's a pot with a metal handle, like this one right here, some of that heat can travel up here, and so sometimes this might be hot and you might think you're safe to just grab this and move it, and you could burn your hand that way if you're not careful. So it's good just as a rule of thumb, if you're not absolutely certain that this is a rubber handle or something that can't conduct heat, you want to grab it with an oven mitt like this to be safe. Now when you're cooking, especially with the stovetop, you're dealing with heat and sometimes with fire, so you need to have a plan for if something goes wrong. If the food in your pot or your pan catches on fire, you see flames, the most important thing that you want to do with a fire is try and starve it of oxygen. If a fire doesn't have any oxygen, it can't burn. So if you have your lid nearby, what you want to do is attempt to put the lid on with the opening away from you. You're trying to keep the fire away from you and contain. Ideally, the fire will just put itself out. If the fire spreads beyond that, get out of your house and call 911. Don't try and deal with a fire that's gone beyond a pan. That is above my pay grade and above your pay grade unless you're a firefighter. If you're cooking with oil or grease, that is especially a case where you don't want to try and put out a fire with water, because water actually will make a grease fire spread even further. So it's important to use a lid like this. If you're in a scenario where you're having to put that fire out or you don't have the lid, instead of using water, which will spread the fire, some people say use flour, but you definitely shouldn't use that because the flour is actually combustible. Baking soda is a great option to cover up the fire. The best option though is a lid that you can close it, cut off the source of oxygen for that fire. Microwaves often have kind of a negative connotation in cooking, but they're actually super helpful tools, especially if you need to heat something up quickly. If you're like me, sometimes you microwave something and it has some instructions on it about heat it for X amount of time and let it sit for Y amount of time. And I hate that because I am hungry and I want to eat my food, so I just want to open up the microwave and pull it out. Our tip for you is do not ignore those instructions about standing time. The first reason is that the microwave makes things hot. So if you cook something for 5 minutes, open the door, reach in, you're probably going to burn your hand. We don't advise that. More importantly, the way that microwave technology works, it doesn't heat things completely consistently. So that 2 minutes of standing time in the microwave is actually so that the heat that has been absorbed by that object in the microwave can dissipate throughout the entirety of the object. So if you grab something right out of the microwave without letting it stand, there might be cold spots and really hot spots. That time is not just to keep you from burning yourself, it's to let the food cook consistently and thoroughly. Most people know that it's not smart to put metal objects in the microwave. Absolutely. The best thing you can do if you're trying to figure out if something should go in your microwave is to look on the object and see if it says that it is labeled as microwave safe. If you're not sure if something is microwave safe, you can actually test something. So say I've got these chopsticks here and there's part of it that's painted, but I don't really know what that paint is made of. It's not something that's a complete metal object that I look at and I know immediately there's no way that goes in a microwave. It's possible it's safe. What you can actually do is take something like a glass measuring cup, fill it about a cup full of water, tap water, put it in the microwave, set your object near it but not touching it on the tray, and then heat that up for about a minute. Once that minute is done, if you reach in, if this object has warmed at all, then it is not microwave safe. But if the heat has only been absorbed by the water, then this actually is good to go. A lot of times when you're cooking something, especially when you're cooking with meat, you want to be very sure that you're cooking it thoroughly. The best tool in your kitchen, or hopefully you have one in your kitchen, if not, you can find one pretty inexpensively, is a kitchen thermometer. So they come in a couple different formats. A lot of them will look like this. It's got a little screen here, some buttons, and a probe that unfolds. It's a pretty sharp little metal point, so be very careful with it. Some of them are like this. They have a little sort of scabbard that they fit into. Got a little screen on top that will tell you the information. And all that you do with this is you stick it right into whatever you're cooking. Now, I'm not cooking with any meat in the kitchen today, so we're gonna use this trusty cucumber just as a demonstration piece. So if this were, imagine this were some chicken that were in the oven, and you wanted to make sure that it were the correct temperature, what you wanna always do is insert your meat thermometer, the probe, into the thickest part of the meat. So not down here, it's real thin. We're gonna go right here in the middle. This is kind of a chunky part of it. Stick it in there, and again, we didn't actually cook this, but you would see the temperature start to rise on this little screen. It works the same way, even if it's this format of thing. You just kind of insert it in here. You don't wanna go all the way through. You're trying to get that thermometer right in the middle of it. The idea here is that if the thickest part of the meat is cooked all the way through, you can pretty safely assume that the thinner parts, where the heat has to spend less time penetrating, would also be cooked through. If you're cooking meat in the microwave, you want to be very intentional about definitely checking the thickest part here, but actually checking multiple places along because of the way that microwaves heat up. When you put something in the oven, the heat is coming from the outside, going to the inside from there. In the microwave, it actually starts heating from about 1 inch from the edge. So this is only, 2 or 3 inch thick thing, so it's gonna start heating up from basically the middle and then spreading out. But if you've got a huge turkey that you're trying to cook in the microwave, it's gonna start heating up about 1 inch into it and then expanding inward and outwardly. So the way that microwaves heat up is inconsistent enough that if you wanna be confident that it's cooked all the way through, you're gonna wanna check that temperature at multiple locations and make sure that it is the proper temperature. For poultry, you want it to be at 165 degrees Fahrenheit. For shellfish and beef, you want it to be around 145 degrees. For ground meat or eggs, you want it to be around 160 degrees Fahrenheit. Thanks so much for watching. If you enjoyed this, we hope you'll check out our other videos online. And we're always doing amazing events at all of our library branches, and you can find out more about those events on our calendar at pioneerlibrarysystem.org. Thanks so much.